Montana Territory, 1873. The blizzard came without warning, turning the prairie into a white hell. Sarah McCall clutches her young son closer, knowing they won't survive another night in their flimsy shelter. Banished by her own community, she has nowhere left to turn. Then through the curtain of snow, a dark figure emerges. The infamous Travis Blackwood, a man whose name mothers use to frighten children. But tonight, this feared outlaw might be their only chance at survival. As he draws his knife, Sarah must make an impossible choice. Trust the devil she knows nothing about, or face certain death in the merciless storm. Before we continue this tale of survival and redemption, tell us where you're watching from, and if you want to know what happens next, make sure you're subscribed. Will Sarah trust the mysterious stranger with her life, or will the bitter prejudices of her past seal their fate in the deadly winter night? 3 days earlier, Sarah had stood before the town council of Millbrook, her trembling fingers clutching a letter that would seal her fate. The parchment was thick, official, the kind used for land deeds and marriage certificates, but this document held no such joy. Through tear-blurred eyes, she read the words again. By order of the town council, Sarah McCall is hereby banished from the township of Millbrook. The silver cross at her throat seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. John had given it to her on their wedding day before the fever took him last spring. Now it was all she had left of him, save for Tommy and the whispers that followed them both. "Mama!" Tommy's small voice drew her from the memory. "Why are they looking at us like that?" Sarah pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, guiding her 6-year-old son past the general store where Mrs. Henderson and her sewing circle gathered. Their faces were masks of righteous indignation, but their eyes held something worse, pity mixed with fear, as if misfortune might be catching. "Keep walking, sweetheart," Sarah murmured, though her own legs felt leaden. Their rented room above. The livery stable had already been cleared out, their meager possessions packed into the small wagon John had left behind. The letter had given them until sundown to leave, but Sarah couldn't bear another moment under those accusing stares. "Sheriff." Wilson stood at the edge of town, his weathered face unreadable as they approached. He'd been kind to them once, sharing extra supplies when John first fell ill. Now he just touched the brim of his hat, eyes downcast. "You've got provisions?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. In truth, they had barely enough to last a week. Some dried beef, flour, beans, and the last of their coffee. The winter had come early this year, and prices at the mercantile had nearly doubled. "And there's a settlement about 40 miles north," the sheriff continued. "Decent folk there might—" "Might what?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Take in a woman accused of witchcraft, of cursing honest folks' cattle, of—" She stopped herself, aware of Tommy's wide eyes fixed upon her face. The sheriff had the grace to look ashamed. "Those are just talks, Sarah. You know how people get when times are hard. They need something to blame. And a widow with a strange-eyed child makes an easy target." The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Tommy's mismatched eyes, one blue, one green, had been a source of wonder when John was alive. Now they were just another mark against them, another whispered proof of something unnatural. The first snowflakes began to fall as they left town, big, lazy flakes that melted as soon as they touched the ground. Tommy pressed his face against the wagon's side, watching them drift down. "Are we going on an adventure, Mama?" he asked, his young voice full of that innocent excitement that made her heart ache. Sarah forced a smile. "Yes, darling, a grand adventure." She snapped the reins gently, urging their old mare forward. The wagon's wheels creaked a mournful tune as Millbrook disappeared behind them. The letter lay crumpled in her pocket, its official seal now broken and smudged. She'd read it so many times she knew every word by heart. Following numerous complaints and evidence of suspicious activities, protection of the community, immediate departure required. Each phrase was a knife twist, each formal signature. At the bottom, a betrayal from people she'd once called friends. The snow began falling harder as they made their way north, the wind picking up strength with each passing mile. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, searching for any sign of shelter. They had passed the last homestead hours ago, and the prairie stretched endlessly before them, a white canvas being painted by the storm. Tommy had fallen asleep, wrapped in every blanket they owned, when the wagon wheel caught in a frozen rut. The crack of splintering wood echoed across the empty landscape like a gunshot. Sarah climbed down, her heart sinking as she saw the damage. The wheel hadn't just broken, it had shattered, the harsh cold making the wood as brittle as glass. "God help us," she whispered, clutching John's cross. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and the snow was falling so thick now she could barely see 10 feet ahead. They couldn't stay with the wagon. It offered no real protection from the wind that howled across the prairie like a hungry wolf. Through the swirling white, she spotted what looked like an outcropping of rocks. It wasn't much, but it might offer some shelter from the worst of the storm. Gathering Tommy in her arms, she took what supplies she could carry and began trudging through the deepening snow. The tears froze on her cheeks as she walked, thinking of all they had lost. Not just their home and community, but their dignity, their sense of belonging. The letter in her pocket seemed to burn with the weight of its injustice, a paper brand marking them as outcasts. "Just a little further," she whispered, though whether to Tommy or herself, she wasn't sure. The snow was falling faster now, and darkness was approaching. They had to find shelter soon, or the bitter cold would claim them both. Above them, the sky had turned the color of a bruise, and the wind carried with it the promise of a long, merciless night. The stranger emerged from the storm like a ghost, his dark duster heavy with snow. Sarah instinctively pulled Tommy closer, though the boy was already half frozen despite their shared warmth. The man's features were hidden beneath the brim of his hat, but there was no mistaking the well-worn gun belt at his hip or the way he moved, careful, measured, like a mountain lion sizing up its surroundings. "Ma'am?" His voice was rough but quiet, almost lost in the howling wind. As he stepped closer, Sarah caught a glimpse of his face in the dying light, a long scar running down his left cheek, beard frosted with ice, and eyes that had seen too much. Recognition hit her like a physical blow. She'd seen that face before, staring out from wanted posters tacked to the sheriff's board in Millbrook. Travis Blackwood, the man they said had killed 3 ranchers in Cold Creek. The devil, they whispered, about in saloons. "Stay back," Sarah warned, though she had nothing to threaten him with save her own desperation. To her surprise, he did just that, raising his gloved hands slowly. "You've got about an hour of daylight left. That overhang won't protect you when the real storm hits." Tommy stirred against her chest, peering out at the stranger with his mismatched eyes. "Are you an angel?" A sound escaped Blackwood's throat, something between a laugh and a cough. "No, boy, far from it." He looked at the meager supplies Sarah had managed to salvage from the wagon. "But I might be able to help, if your ma permits." Sarah's mind raced. She'd heard the stories about Blackwood, how he'd appeared out of nowhere during the Miller family massacre, tracking the killers through 3 territories, how he'd left them strung up like scarecrows, a warning to others. But she'd also heard whispers of other tales, of a mysterious benefactor who'd paid off Widow Thompson's mortgage, of lost children found and returned home. The wind cut through her thin coat like knives, and Tommy shivered violently against her. What choice did she really have? "There's a line cabin about half a mile north," Blackwood continued, his eyes never leaving her face. "Used by trappers in season. It ain't much, but it's got 4 walls and a roof. Why help us?" Sarah's voice cracked from cold and fear. Blackwood was silent for a long moment, snow gathering on his broad shoulders. "Because no child should die in the cold," he finally said, "and no mother should have to watch it happen." Something in his tone made Sarah look closer. Behind the hardness in his eyes, she caught a glimpse of old pain, deep and unhealed. This was a man who carried his own ghosts. "I won't hurt you," he added softly. "You have my word." Tommy tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, I'm so cold." The wanted poster in Millbrook had offered $500 for Blackwood, dead or alive. It had listed his crimes in stark black ink: each one worse than the last, but it hadn't shown the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to Tommy, or the careful way he kept his distance to avoid frightening them. "The storm's getting worse," Blackwood said, and as if to emphasize his point, a gust of wind nearly knocked Sarah off her feet. He stepped forward instinctively to steady her, but stopped when she flinched. "We need to move. Now." Sarah looked, down at Tommy's pale face, then back at the man everyone called a monster. Sometimes survival meant taking chances you never thought you would. Sometimes safety came from the most unlikely sources. "Lead the way, Mr. Blackwood." A shadow of something, surprise, respect, crossed his scarred face. "Travis," he corrected quietly. "Just Travis." He shrugged out of his duster and held it out to her, handle of his revolver deliberately turned away. "The boy needs it more than I do." As Sarah wrapped the heavy coat around Tommy, she caught the scent of leather, wood smoke, and something else, a hint of the man beneath the legend. The warmth of the coat seemed to seep into her son immediately, and his shivering lessened. Travis turned north, breaking trail through the deepening snow. "Stay close," he called over his shoulder. "Storm's about to get mean." Sarah gathered Tommy in her arms and followed, leaving the wanted posters' warnings behind in the growing darkness. Sometimes she was learning, the devil you knew was preferable to the storm that wanted to kill you. The line cabin was little, more than a shack, its wooden walls barely holding against the wind's fury. Travis moved quickly, clearing snow from the entrance, while Sarah huddled with Tommy in the marginal shelter of a snow-laden pine. "It's not much," Travis said, shouldering open the frozen door, "but it'll keep the worst of the storm out." He paused, head tilted like a wolf catching a scent. "Something else is out there." Sarah clutched Tommy tighter. "Wolves? Cattle, wild ones from the sound." He pulled a long-bladed knife from his belt, the steel catching what little light remained. That could be the difference between surviving and not. The knife's handle was worn smooth, its blade showing signs of frequent use and careful maintenance. Sarah had seen similar knives in the hands of hunters and trappers, but this one was different, a tool of both survival and violence, much like its owner. "Stay here," Travis ordered, checking the cabin's interior. "Get a fire started if you can. There should be dry wood stacked inside." He pressed the knife's sheath into her hands, just in case. Before Sarah could protest, he was gone, swallowed by the swirling snow. Tommy watched him disappear with wide eyes. "Will he come back, Mama?" Sarah studied the knife in her hands. It was warm from Travis's body heat, the leather sheath tooled with intricate patterns. A weapon, yes, but also something personal, almost intimate. He wouldn't have left it if he didn't plan to return. "Yes, sweetheart, I think he will." Teishu. Cabin's interior was cold but dry, with a small pot-bellied stove in one corner. Sarah found matches and kindling, and soon had a small fire burning. Tommy huddled close to the stove, his mismatched eyes reflecting the flames. An hour passed, marked only by the wind's howling and the crackling of the fire. Sarah had just begun to fear the worst when heavy footsteps approached the cabin. Travis shouldered through the door, covered in blood and snow. "Had to be quick," he said, breathing hard. "Storms driving a small herd this way. Got one before they scattered." He pulled off his gloves, revealing raw, red hands. "Need help bringing it in?" Sarah stood immediately. "Tommy, stay by the fire. We'll be right back." Outside, the storm had reached full fury. Through the darkness and driving snow, Sarah could make out a dark mass not far from the cabin. Travis had already field-dressed the steer, its steam rising in the frigid air. "Grab that end," he directed, handing her a rope. Together they dragged the carcass closer to the cabin's shelter. Travis worked quickly with a smaller knife, cutting away the best portions of meat. "Done this before?" Sarah asked, watching his practiced movements. "Too many times." His voice was grim. "But it means we'll eat, means the boy will eat." The way he said it, the boy, not your boy, caught Sarah's attention. There was something in his tone, an old wound not fully healed. Back inside, Travis set about preparing the meat while Sarah tended the fire. Tommy watched them both with silent fascination, wrapped in Travis's too large duster. "You've got questions," Travis said quietly as he worked. about the stories, about what they say I've done. Sarah added wood to the fire, choosing her words carefully. Are they true? Some. He tested the edge of his knife with his thumb. Not all. Truth's usually somewhere in between what people say and what really happened. Like with us? Tommy's small voice surprised them both. The people in town said mean things about Mama, but they weren't true. Travis's hand stilled on the knife. He looked at Tommy for a long moment, then at Sarah. Something passed between them, understanding perhaps, or recognition of shared injustice. Exactly like that boy, he said softly. He returned to his work, but his movements were gentler, somehow, as if Tommy's words had smoothed away some of his rougher edges. As the smell of cooking meat filled the cabin, Sarah watched Travis with new eyes, his hands capable of both violence and surprising tenderness, his face marked by that fearsome scar, but softened when he spoke to Tommy. The careful way he'd prepared their meal, ensuring Tommy got the best portions. The knife that had killed their dinner, now rested clean and sharp at Travis's hip, returned to its rightful owner. Like the man himself, it was both weapon and tool, its true nature dependent on necessity and circumstance. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the cabin's walls, something else was building, fragile as a spark, warm as the fire that kept the darkness at bay. Trust, Sarah realized, could grow in the strangest soil, nourished by shared survival and unspoken understanding. Night settled over the cabin like a heavy blanket, the storm's fury muffled by the thick layer of snow, now coating every surface. Tommy had fallen into a fitful sleep near the stove, his cheeks flushed with more than just the fire's warmth. Sarah pressed her hand to his forehead, her heart sinking at the heat she found there. He's burning up, she whispered, more to herself than to Travis, who sat cleaning his gear in the cabin's far corner. The scraping of Travis's whetstone against steel stopped. There's willow bark in my saddlebag, he said without looking up. Makes a tea that'll help with the fever. Sarah hesitated only a moment before moving to his battered leather saddlebags. As she searched for the bark, her fingers brushed against something stiff, a photograph, its edges worn soft with handling. She started to withdraw her hand, but Travis's voice stopped her. Go ahead, he said quietly. Reckon you've earned the right to know. The photograph was faded, but Sarah could still make out the faces. A younger Travis, without the scar, standing beside a woman with kind eyes and a small boy about Tommy's age. They were smiling, all three of them, in the way people smiled before life had taught them better. Caroline and James, Travis offered, his voice rough. My wife and son. Sarah looked up sharply. What happened? Diphtheria. The word fell, like a stone in the quiet cabin. 6 years ago, I was away, tracking rustlers for the Cattle Association. By the time I got back, he trailed off, the whetstone resuming its steady rhythm. Sarah carefully returned the photograph to its place. I'm sorry. Been a long time since I've said their names out loud. Travis tested his knife's edge again, a habit she was beginning to recognize as more comfort than necessity. Your boy. His eyes remind me of James. Different colors, but the same look. Same way of seeing right through a person. Tommy stirred in his sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. Sarah quickly prepared the willow bark tea, supporting his head as she helped him drink. His skin burned against her hands. John, my husband, died of fever too, she found herself saying. Last spring, the town doctor was too busy with more important patients to come see him. After that, people started whispering, said I must have done something to anger God, to be punished so. Travis's laugh was bitter. God's got nothing to do with it. People just need someone to blame when life turns cruel. Is that why you help people now? The stories I've heard, some stories are true enough. He moved closer to check Tommy's. Fever himself, his calloused hand gentle on the boy's brow. Found I couldn't just stand by anymore, watching others suffer what we suffered. The law doesn't always reach far enough out here. Sometimes justice needs a rougher hand. Sarah watched him tend to Tommy with surprising skill, remembering the wanted poster's accusations. How many of his supposed crimes had been acts of mercy? How many had been justice served where the law had failed? Caroline was a healer, Travis said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. Taught me about herbs, tending wounds. Said knowledge was knowledge, no matter where it came from. He smiled faintly. She'd have liked you. Strong woman. No patience for fools. The photograph seemed to burn in Sarah's mind, that happy family, forever frozen in a moment before tragedy. She understood now why he'd stopped at their makeshift shelter, why he'd risked his life to hunt in the storm. He was trying to prevent history from repeating itself, trying to save another mother and child from the fate that had claimed his own family. Tommy's fever seemed to ease slightly under the willow bark's influence. He curled into Sarah's lap, his breathing steadier now. Outside, the storm showed no signs of weakening, but inside the cabin, something was changing. The space between them felt different, warmer, less guarded. "Get some rest," Travis said, settling back against the wall. "I'll keep watch." Sarah nodded, too tired to argue. As she drifted off, she caught a glimpse of Travis pulling the photograph from his saddlebag again, studying it in the firelight. His expression was tender, human, worlds away from the hardened killer of frontier legend. The wind howled its lonely song outside, but within the cabin's walls, 4 lost souls, 2 present, 2 remembered, shared the warmth of unexpected understanding. The cool dawn brought no relief from the storm, only a grey dimness that barely penetrated the cabin's frosted windows. Sarah woke to find Travis teaching Tommy how to play checkers with a makeshift board drawn in the dust and bits of kindling for pieces. Her son's fever had broken in the night, leaving him weak but alert. "King me!" Tommy's voice was hoarse, but excited. "Well, would you look at that?" Travis said, something like a real smile softening his scarred face. "Your boy's a natural strategist, ma'am." Sarah sat up, automatically reaching to twist her wedding ring, a habit formed in moments of anxiety. The simple gold band caught the firelight, drawing Travis's attention. "Most would have sold it by now," he observed quietly. "Times being what they are." "They wanted me to," Sarah admitted, remembering the pawnbroker's eager eyes. "Said a widow with a child had no business being sentimental." She traced the ring's worn surface. "But it's not about sentiment, it's about truth." Tommy had dozed off again, curled up in Travis's duster. The outlaw waited, patient as winter itself, while Sarah gathered her thoughts. "When John died, Miss, Henderson's prize bull got sick the same week. Then the miller's sheep started dropping and the drought hit." Sarah's bitter laugh held no humor. "They needed someone to blame, a widow who knew herbs, who kept to herself. It was too perfect. But this ring," she held up her hand, "this ring reminds me who I am, who we were." "And who's that?" Travis asked softly. "Just people. John was the town farrier. I helped birth babies, tended the sick when I could. We weren't special, but we were happy." She met Travis's eyes. "Until happiness became suspicious." "Grief makes people cruel," Travis said, stoking the fire. "Fear makes them crueler still. They said I cursed the town." The words tumbled out now, secrets held too long. Said Tommy's eyes were a sign of wickedness. That John's death was divine punishment for harboring a... She stopped, shoulders shaking. Travis moved closer, his presence solid as a mountain. "For harboring a witch?" His voice was dangerously quiet. Sarah nodded. "They found John's old medical journal, full of herb lore and remedies passed down from his mother. Called it a spell book. When the drought came..." She twisted the ring again. "Well, they needed a reason, didn't they? And no one stood up for you?" "Sheriff Wilson tried at first, but then his daughter took ill and..." She shrugged, the gesture containing worlds of hurt. "It was easier to believe in witchcraft than bad luck, easier to cast out one widow than face their own fears." Tommy stirred, whimpering in his sleep. Both adults turned to him instinctively, but it was Travis who reached him first, adjusting the duster to better shield him from drafts. "You know," Travis said, still looking at Tommy, "I've killed men for less than what your town did." The statement should have frightened her. Instead, Sarah felt an unexpected warmth, not at the threat of violence, but at the protective instinct behind it. "Is that what happened in Cold Creek?" she asked carefully. "The 3 ranchers they say you killed?" Travis was silent for a long moment, watching Tommy sleep. They were using Apache children for target practice. Law wouldn't touch them too. Much money, too many connections. His hand unconsciously touched the scar on his face. Sometimes justice wears a different face out here. Sarah looked down at her wedding ring, thinking of other rings, the ones that had formed around her in the town square, faces she'd known for years, transformed by fear and hatred. "We're not so different, you and I," she said finally. "Both, judged by people who never bothered to know the truth." "Truth's a luxury out here," Travis replied, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "Sometimes all we get is understanding." Outside, the wind howled its agreement, but inside the cabin, the space between judgment and understanding had grown smaller, warmer, filled with something that felt surprisingly like hope. Travis's hand went to his gun before the sound fully registered. Horses, their movements muffled by snow, approaching the cabin. He pulled a brass pocket watch from his vest, checking its face in the dim light. 3 o'clock, he murmured. No honest man travels in this weather at this hour. Sarah was already moving, gathering Tommy from his sleeping place by the stove. The boy woke silently, eyes wide, but trusting as his mother pressed a finger to her lips. "Back room," Travis directed, voice barely above a whisper. "There's a board under the window leads to a root cellar. Used it myself more than once." He checked the watch again, its steady ticking a counterpoint to Sarah's racing heart. "If you hear shooting, take the boy and run northeast. Storm's dying in that direction." "And you?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Travis gave her a ghost of a smile. "I'll make sure they're too busy to follow." The approaching riders were closer now, 3, maybe 4 by the sound. Travis positioned himself by the window, using the watch's polished case to catch a reflection of the yard. 4 men, armed, looking for shelter, but not the kind sort. Sarah hesitated at the back room's threshold. Why not just let them pass? "The storm, they've already seen the smoke." Travis's voice was grim. "Men like that, they don't leave witnesses, especially not women and children." Tommy tugged at his mother's skirt. "I'm scared, Mama." "I know, sweetheart." She knelt beside him, forcing calm into her voice. "But remember what Papa used to say about being brave? It's okay to be scared," Tommy recited dutifully, "as long as you do what's right anyway." A smile flickered across Travis's scarred face. "Smart man, your Papa." He checked the watch one final time before tucking it away. "They'll be here in 2 minutes. Get below." Sarah guided Tommy toward the root cellar, but the boy suddenly pulled away, running back to Travis. Before either adult could react, he threw his arms around the outlaw's legs in a fierce hug. "Be careful, Mr. Travis," he whispered. Something raw and painful crossed Travis's face as he touched the boy's head. "Go with your mama now, son, quick and quiet, like we practiced with the checkers." Once Sarah and Tommy were safely hidden, Travis doused the fire, letting darkness fill the cabin. The pocket watch ticked steadily in his vest, counting down the moments until the riders arrived. They came with the wind, 4 shadows darker than the storm. Their horses were lean, hard-ridden animals, and their rifles spoke of recent use. The leader, a man wearing a buffalo coat too fine for his rough appearance, dismounted first. "Well, well," he called out. "Seems we've found ourselves some shelter. Anyone home?" Travis waited, letting them draw closer. The watch ticked on, marking each step of their approach. The leader kicked in the door, sending it crashing against the wall. "Come on out, friend. We saw your smoke. No need to be unfriendly on a night like this." "Smell meat, boss," one of the others said. "Someone's been cooking recent." "Search the place," the leader ordered. "Anyone you find, kill them quiet. No sense advertising our presence to any law that might be about." Travis's hand tightened. On his gun, from below, he could hear Tommy's barely controlled breathing, smell Sarah's fear mixing with the lingering scent of wood smoke. The watch marked each second with mechanical precision, like a countdown to violence. But violence wasn't the only way. "Evening, gentlemen," Travis called out, stepping into view with his hands raised. "Mighty poor weather for traveling." The marauders spun, weapons raised, but something in Travis's stance made them hesitate. The leader's eyes narrowed, recognition dawning. Well, I'll be damned, he breathed. Travis Blackwood himself. You have me at a disadvantage. Travis replied calmly, though Sarah could hear the steel beneath his words. Jake Hawkins, we rode together in '68 down near the Mexican border. That was a lifetime ago. Travis's voice carried clearly to the root cellar. I've changed since then. So I've heard. Hawkins spat tobacco juice onto the cabin floor. Gone soft, they say, helping widows and orphans like some charity man. Not soft, Travis corrected quietly, just particular about the company I keep. The watch ticked on in his vest, counting heartbeats and choices, measuring the distance between what he had been and what he had become. In the root cellar, Sarah held Tommy close, understanding now that sometimes the most dangerous moments came not with gunfire, but with words that carried the weight of past sins. The marauders' departure left a silence heavy as new snow. Travis watched until their shadows disappeared into the storm before turning to the root cellar. It's safe now, but as Sarah emerged with Tommy, the boy collapsed against her, his fever raging once again. He's burning up, she gasped, struggling. To support his weight, Travis caught them both, lifting Tommy easily. The cold cellar didn't help matters. He laid the boy on the cabin's only cot, his movements gentler than Sarah would have thought possible from hands that had held guns moments before. From beneath a loose floorboard, Travis retrieved a worn leather medical kit, its contents rattling softly as he set it on the table. Caroline insisted I learn more than just battlefield medicine, he explained, unrolling the kit to reveal an array of instruments, herbs, and small glass bottles. Said a man should know how to heal as well as he knows how to hurt. Sarah recognized some of the herbs, yarrow, echinacea, the willow bark they'd used before. But there were others, carefully labeled in a woman's flowing script, that spoke of knowledge passed down through generations. Your wife taught you well, she said softly, watching Travis measure dried herbs into a cup. She'd have known better what to do. His hands were steady as he worked, but his voice carried an edge of old grief. This is just shadow learning, echoes of her wisdom. Tommy stirred restlessly, his mismatched eyes glazed with fever. Papa? He called out weakly. Papa, where are you? Sarah's heart clenched, but before she could respond, Travis was there, his big hand gentle on Tommy's brow. Your papa's watching over you, son, he said quietly. Rest now. Your mama's here, and I'm not letting anything happen to either of you. The promise in his voice made Sarah's breath catch. She watched as Travis mixed herbs with practiced efficiency, his scarred face intent on his work. This was a different man than the fearsome gunslinger who had faced down the marauders. This was someone who understood loss, who knew the value of saving what could be saved. Here, Travis said, holding out a cup of steaming liquid. Help him drink this. It's bitter, but it'll help break the fever. Sarah supported Tommy's head while Travis held the cup to his lips. Their hands brushed in the process, and neither pulled away immediately. The touch lingered, warm and electric in the cabin's chill air. I've been thinking about what Hawkins said, Sarah ventured as they worked together to make Tommy comfortable. About you changing. Travis's hands stilled on the medical kit. Does it matter what I was? What matters is what you chose to become. She touched his arm lightly. A man who carries healing herbs alongside his bullets, who faces down killers without drawing his gun, who teaches a sick boy to play checkers in the middle of the night. Maybe I'm just getting old, Travis said, but there was a softness in his eyes that belied the words. Tired of solving everything with lead and powder. Tommy's breathing had eased, his sleep more natural now. Sarah smoothed his hair back, remembering another fevered night when John had done the same. But this time, she wasn't alone in her vigil. Caroline would be proud, she said quietly, of how you've used what she taught you. Travis touched one of the small bottles in his kit, its label faded, but still bearing his wife's handwriting. Sometimes I think I hear her voice when I'm mixing the herbs, correcting my measurements, reminding me to check for fever in the hands and feet, not just the forehead. Those we love never really leave us, Sarah whispered. They just teach us to love differently. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Outside, the storm's fury had lessened, but the wind still moaned around the cabin's corners, reminding them of the wilderness beyond their fragile shelter. Travis repacked the medical kit with the same care he showed his weapons, each item in its proper place. But when he moved to return it to its hiding place, he hesitated. "Better keep it close," he said, setting it on the table within easy reach. "Night's not over yet." The simple gesture spoke volumes, about trust, about choices, about the possibility of change. Sarah watched him check on Tommy one more time, before settling into his watchful position by the window, and realized that sometimes healing came in unexpected forms, carried by unlikely angels with scarred faces and gentle hands. The night deepened, but Tommy's fever continued to recede. Sarah dozed fitfully in a chair beside his cot, waking occasionally to find Travis still alert, alternating between watching the window and working on something in his hands. The soft scrape of his knife against wood became a gentle counterpoint to the dying storm's whispers. "What are you making?" she finally asked, her voice rough with sleep. Travis glanced up, then back to his work. "Something for the boy, if that's all right." In the fading firelight, Sarah could see the shape emerging from the piece of pine he was carving. A horse, its lines clean and graceful despite the crude tools and poor light. Each stroke of his knife was precise, considered, revealing the form hidden within the wood. "James liked horses," Travis said softly, smoothing a rough edge. "Used to beg me to take him riding, even before he could walk proper." Sarah moved closer, drawn by the rare openness in his voice. "Tommy's never been on a horse. John was planning to teach him, but time got short." Travis nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It has a way of doing that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the wood shavings curl away from Travis's blade. His hands, so deadly in other circumstances, moved with artist's grace over the emerging figure. "You're good at this," Sarah observed. "Caroline taught me this too, believe it or not." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Said a man needed something to do with his hands besides pull triggers. Started me with simple things, spoons, bowls. Found it helped on long nights when sleep wouldn't come." Tommy stirred on his cot, but peacefully now, his breathing easy and regular. Sarah touched his forehead, cool at last, the fever broken. "There," Travis said, making a final cut. He held up the carving, testing its balance. The wooden horse seemed almost alive in the firelight, caught in mid-gallop with its mane flying. "What do you think?" "It's beautiful." Sarah reached out to touch it, her fingers brushing Travis's as he handed it to her. Neither pulled away immediately, and in that brief contact, she felt the calluses on his fingers, the strength and gentleness that defined him. "James had one almost like it," Travis said, his voice low. "Left it behind that last morning when—" He trailed off, lost for a moment in memory. "Some things you can't get back, but maybe some things you can pass forward." Sarah looked at him then, really looked, at the scar that marked his face, the silver threading his dark hair, the weariness and hope warring in his eyes. Here was a man who had lost everything, who had every reason to turn his back on the world. Instead, he had chosen to help others, to carry healing alongside harm, to carve beauty in the darkness. "Thank you," she whispered, meaning more than just the horse. Travis met her gaze, and something shifted in the space between them. Something warm and unexpected, like spring thaw after a long winter. For a moment, neither spoke, letting the possibility of that warmth grow. Then Tommy coughed lightly in his sleep, breaking the spell. Travis cleared his throat, turning to add wood to the fire. "Should save it for morning," he said gruffly. "Give him something to look forward to when he wakes." Sarah set the carving on the table, where Tommy would see it first thing. The firelight caught its curves, casting a shadow that seemed to gallop across the cabin wall. A gift, she realized, not just for Tommy but for all of them. A reminder that even in the darkest times, beauty could be found, created, shared. "You know," she said carefully, settling back in her chair, "John used to say that God puts people in our path for a reason, even when we don't understand it at the time." Travis was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't respond. Finally he said, Maybe. Or maybe sometimes people just need to find each other, reason or no reason. Outside, the storm's fury had diminished to a gentle snowfall, each flake a promise of cleansing, of new beginnings. Inside, a carved horse stood watch over 3 wounded souls, its wooden heart holding the possibility of healing for them all. Dawn broke pale and quiet, the storm's fury spent at last. Travis stood at the window, watching the pristine snow for signs of movement when something caught his eye. A glint of metal half buried in the snow where he'd confronted Hawkins and his men. "Stay here," he told Sarah, checking his gun before stepping outside. The cold hit him like a physical blow as he made his way to the spot. There, partially revealed by the wind, lay a military badge torn from his coat during the confrontation. He hadn't even noticed it missing in the tension of the moment. The sound of distant voices made him freeze. Through the crystal-clear morning air, he could hear men calling to each other, the crunch of horses moving through deep snow. Back inside, Sarah was already alert to the change in atmosphere. "What is it?" "Search party," Travis said grimly, turning the badge over in his hands. "Probably from Millbrook, looking for you and Tommy." Tommy still slept peacefully, the carved horse clutched to his chest. Sarah moved to the window, her face pale. "They'll take him from me," she whispered. "They'll say I endangered him by running." Travis looked down at the badge in his palm. Union Army, 7th Cavalry, with his real name and rank still legible beneath the tarnish. Captain Michael Travis Blackwood, decorated for valor at Gettysburg. "No," he said quietly, "they won't." Sarah had noticed the badge now. "You were a soldier." "Captain," he corrected, his voice distant with memory. "Led a cavalry company through the worst of it. After the war, they asked me to hunt deserters, then outlaws. Seemed natural enough, tracking men, bringing justice, until I realized justice wasn't always what the law served." The voices were closer now. Sarah could make out individual words, familiar names from Millbrook. "That's how you met Caroline?" she asked, understanding dawning in her eyes. Travis nodded. "She was a field nurse, saw the same things I did, how thin the line was between right and wrong, how justice sometimes needed a gentler hand." He smiled, and faintly, "She's the one who taught me to question orders, to look deeper than just law and duty. And after, when she and James, I couldn't wear the uniform anymore, couldn't pretend that following orders meant doing right." He held up the badge. "So I became something else, someone who could help people the law wouldn't touch." A horse whinnied nearby, followed by the sound of men dismounting. Sarah moved closer to Tommy's cot, protective as a mother wolf. "They're here," she breathed. Travis squared his shoulders, feeling the weight of his choices, past and present, settling around him like a familiar coat. "Sarah," he said softly, "do you trust me?" She looked at him then, really looked, past the scar, past the legend, past the weight of all their shared wounds. "Yes," she said simply, "I do." He pressed the badge into her hand, let his fingers linger against her palm. "Then let me show you what Caroline taught me, about justice, about healing, about making things right." Tommy stirred, blinking awake. "Mr. Travis, are the bad men back?" "No, son." Travis smiled, and for the first time, Sarah saw no trace of the hardened gunslinger in his face. "Just some folks who need to learn what your mama already knows. That sometimes the truth isn't what we think it is." Heavy boots approached the cabin door. Travis straightened, but didn't reach for his gun. Instead, he picked up his medical kit, set it prominently on the table beside the carved horse. "Sheriff." "Wilson's with them," Sarah said, recognizing a voice. "He at least tried to help before, then he can help again." Travis touched the badge in Sarah's hand. Sometimes people just need a reason to do what's right. Sometimes they need to see that even outlaws can carry healing, and even healers can be called witches. The door rattled with a heavy knock. "Anyone alive in there?" Travis looked at Sarah, saw his own choice reflected in her eyes. They'd all been judged by others' fears, all been cast out and called devils, but here, in this moment, they had the chance to show a different truth. "Well," he said quietly, "shall we show them what redemption looks like?" Sarah's fingers found his, squeezed once, Together they turned to face whatever justice or mercy the morning would bring. Sheriff Wilson's voice carried through the door again. "By order of the Township of Millbrook, open up!" Sarah's hand tightened on the crumpled community notice she'd kept in her pocket, her mark of shame now transformed into something else entirely. She looked at Travis, saw the quiet strength in his stance, then at Tommy, clutching his wooden horse while watching them both with complete trust. "I'll handle this," she said softly, moving toward the door. Travis touched her arm. "Sarah, trust goes both ways," she reminded him, and opened the door. The morning light silhouetted Sheriff Wilson and 4 other men from Millbrook, their breath frosting in the crystal air. The sheriff's eyes widened at the sight of her, then narrowed as he caught movement behind her. "Step aside, Sarah," he said, hand moving to his gun. "That's Travis Blackwood with you, ain't it?" "Yes." She lifted her chin. "The man who saved my son's life, while you and yours drove us into a killing storm." The sheriff had the grace to look uncomfortable. "We've been searching since we found your wagon." The council, they realized maybe they were too harsh. Too harsh? Sarah's laugh held no humor. She pulled out the community notice, its official seal gleaming dully. "Is that what you call charging an innocent woman with witchcraft? Driving her and her child into certain death?" One of the other men, Sarah recognized him as Henderson's son-in-law, stepped forward. "Now see here, woman." "No, you see here." Sarah's voice cut through the morning air like steel. "While you were sitting warm in your homes, convincing yourselves you'd done right, this dangerous outlaw was hunting in a blizzard to feed my son. While you were sleeping peaceful, he was tending Tommy's fever with medicines his wife taught him to use." "His wife?" The sheriff's brow furrowed. "Caroline Blackwood? The field nurse from—" "The one who saved your brother at Gettysburg," Travis said quietly, stepping into view. "Hello, Jack. Been a long time." The shock on Wilson's face was almost comical. "Captain Blackwood, they said you were dead after—" "Caroline and the boy? Part of me was." Travis's hand rested lightly on Tommy's shoulder. "Found other ways to serve justice since then. Not all of them legal, but all of them right." The other men muttered among themselves, hands straying toward weapons. Sarah moved instinctively between them and Tommy, but it was the boy himself who broke the tension. "Please don't hurt Mr. Travis," he said, his mismatched eyes bright with tears. "He made me this horse, see? And he saved us from the bad men in the night, and he made me better when I was sick." The sheriff stared at the carved horse in Tommy's hands, then at Travis's medical kit on the table, then at the military badge Sarah still held. Something shifted in his weathered face, understanding perhaps or recognition of his own part in what had happened. "The council sent me with papers," he said slowly, pulling out an envelope, "rescinding the banishment, offering compensation for the misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Sarah's voice shook with suppressed rage. "Is that what you call it when you destroy a woman's life on nothing but gossip and fear?" "No," Wilson said quietly. "That's what they call it. I call it a shame I'll carry to my grave." He looked at Travis. "Like other shames we've carried since the war, eh, Captain?" Travis nodded slowly. "Question is, Jack, what do we do about it now?" The sheriff was silent for a long moment, looking between Sarah, Tommy, and Travis. Finally he said, "Way I see it, I just found a grieving widow and her boy, saved from the storm by a passing stranger, good Samaritan type, former military man. By the look of him," he touched his hat, "might want to invite them all back to town, seeing as how the council's had a change of heart." "And if this stranger has a price on his head?" Travis asked softly. Wilson's smile was grim. "Funny thing about paper. Burns real easy in a stove, especially when it's built on lies and fear instead of justice." Sarah felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. She looked at Travis, saw the same cautious hope in his eyes. Tommy, sensing the change in mood, pressed between them both, one hand holding his mother's skirt, the other reaching for Travis's calloused fingers. "Does this mean we can stay together?" he asked, looking up at them with complete trust. "All of us?" The question hung in the morning air like frost, fragile and beautiful. Sarah felt Travis's hand brush hers, felt the warmth of possibility in that simple touch. Sometimes, she realized, redemption came not in grand gestures, but in small moments of grace, a carved horse, a healing touch, a sheriff choosing mercy over law. Yes, she said softly, letting her fingers twine with Travis's. I believe it does. Travis disappeared into the back room while Sheriff Wilson dismissed his men, sending them ahead to town with news of Sarah and Tommy's safety. When Travis returned, he carried a battered leather journal, its pages swollen with years of use and weather. Kept this since the war, he said, setting it on the table. Habit Caroline gave me. Said a man should record his deeds, good and bad, so he knows which weight pulls harder on his soul. The sheriff picked up the journal with careful hands. This what I think it is, Captain? Every person I've killed. Travis's voice was quiet. And everyone I've saved. Reckon the saving outweighs the killing these days, though the law might disagree. Sarah watched as Wilson opened the journal, his eyes widening at the neat columns of dates and names. Travis had recorded everything, not just actions, but reasons, circumstances, choices made, and prices paid. Cold Creek, Wilson murmured, finding the entry. 3 ranches, but here you've written that they were hunting children, Travis finished. Apache kids mostly. Sport killing, they called it. Law wouldn't touch them. Too much money involved. So I did what needed doing. The sheriff nodded slowly. And this entry, 2 months back. Widow Thompson's mortgage. Man trying to force her off her land. Needed convincing to be reasonable. By which you mean... Travis's smile was harsh. By which I mean he's still breathing, though he might walk with a limp. Some lessons don't need killing to teach. Tommy had been listening intently, his small face serious. Now he tugged at Travis's sleeve. Are you writing about us too, Mr. Travis? About the bad men in the storm? Already did, son. Travis flipped to the journal's last entry, written in the pre-dawn hours. Put down how your mama stood brave against those riders, how you stayed quiet as a mouse when danger was near. Wrote about your fever and your mama's healing knowledge that those town folks called witchcraft. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she read the entry. Travis had recorded everything. Her gentle care with Tommy, her knowledge of herbs that matched his own, her courage in the face of banishment. He'd written of her strength, her dignity, her unwavering faith in what was right. Been adding to this journal since the war, Travis continued, but it's these last few days that taught me the most about justice, about how it doesn't always. Wear a badge or carry a gun. Wilson cleared his throat. Town council's not going to like this. Man with your reputation, keeping company with what? Sarah's voice was steel. A widow who knows healing? A woman who chose her child's safety over her reputation? Or are you still afraid of a boy's mismatched eyes? The sheriff had the grace to look ashamed. Fear makes fools of us. All, ma'am, but maybe it's time we learned better. Travis's hand found Sarah's, squeezed gently. Journal's yours, Jack. Take it back to your council. Let them read what real justice looks like. Not their kind, built on fear and gossip, but the kind that happens when good people stand up for what's right. And if they don't see it that way, then we'll ride on. Travis's voice was calm. There's other towns, other people needing help. Caroline taught me that healing doesn't just mean fixing bodies. Sometimes it means fixing what's broken in. People's hearts and minds. Tommy pressed between them, looking up at the sheriff with his strange, beautiful eyes. But I don't want to ride on. I want to stay here with Mama and Mr. Travis, please. Wilson looked at the boy, then at the journal in his hands. 20 years of choices recorded in ink and blood, leading to this moment. He closed the book carefully. Reckon a town that can't learn from its mistakes doesn't deserve good people, he said finally. And reckon a man who's done what this journal shows, he nodded to Travis, has earned the right to stop running. Sarah felt something tight in her chest release. She looked at Travis, saw the same cautious hope in his eyes that she felt in her heart. Besides, the sheriff added with a hint of a smile, town's been needing a proper healer since Doc Matthews retired. Might be good to have folks who know both herbcraft and horsecraft, assuming you're interested. Travis's answer was in his eyes as he looked at Sarah, in the gentle way he touched Tommy's head, in the years of recorded justice and mercy bound in leather on the table. The morning sun streamed through the cabin windows, turning the fresh snow to diamonds, promising new beginnings for those brave enough to believe in them. The town hall was packed when Sheriff Wilson spread the records across the council table. Winter sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating yellowed pages that told a story of fear, prejudice, and hasty judgment. "Here," Wilson said, pointing to an entry from the previous spring. "Right when the drought started, every loss of livestock, every failed crop, all blamed on Sarah McCall, with not a shred of proof beyond timing and fear." Councilman Henderson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The timing! Travis interrupted quietly from his place beside Sarah, matched exactly with unusual weather patterns across 3 territories. He produced a newspaper clipping from his journal. "Same drought that hit Kansas and Nebraska, unless you're suggesting Mrs. McCall's influence extends that far." Tommy sat between them, still clutching his wooden horse, watching the proceedings with solemn eyes. Sarah kept one hand on his shoulder, drawing strength from his presence. The town clerk, Mr. Patterson, cleared his throat. "There's, something else." He produced a leather-bound ledger, its pages dog-eared with use. "Been keeping weather records for 30 years. This drought matches exactly with patterns from 1843 and 1856, long before Mrs. McCall was even born." A murmur ran through the crowded room. Mrs. Henderson, who had led much of the gossip against Sarah, looked down at her hands. "And the medical journal?" Wilson prompted. "The one you called a spell book?" Patterson nodded, producing John McCall's careful records. "Standard herbcraft, same as my grandmother used. Same as Doc Matthews himself recommended when supplies ran short." "The same medicines," Travis added softly, "that helped save Tommy's life during the storm. The knowledge you condemned is the only reason he's alive today." Sarah felt tears threatening, but held them back. This wasn't about vindication. It was about truth, about setting things right. "I move to strike all charges from the record," Wilson said formally, "and to issue a public apology to Sarah McCall and her son." "Seconded," Patterson said quickly. Others nodded, shame evident on their faces. But it was Mrs. Henderson who stood, her voice wavering. "Sarah, I was the first to whisper against you after my Henry's bull died. I was so angry, so afraid. I needed someone to blame." She wiped at her eyes. "Can you ever forgive an old woman's fear?" Sarah looked at Travis, saw in his eyes the same understanding she felt. Fear could make monsters of good people, but courage could unmake them just as easily. "There's nothing to forgive," she said quietly. "Fear is a natural thing. It's what we choose to do with it that matters." Tommy, sensing the emotion in the room, stood up. "Does this mean we can come home now? Mr. Travis, too?" A chuckle rippled through the crowd, breaking the tension. Wilson smiled. "Well, about that, town's been needing a proper healer, as I mentioned, and seems to me we've got 2 folks here who know their way around both medicines and people." 3, Tommy corrected, seriously holding up his wooden horse. "Mr. Travis makes things, too. He can fix people's hurts inside and out." Sarah felt Travis's hand find hers under the table, warm and sure. The touch spoke of possibility, of futures neither of them had dared imagine days ago. "If the town will have us," Travis said carefully, "we'd be honored to serve." Patterson was already writing in his ledger, making it official. "The council hereby appoints Sarah McCall and Michael Travis Blackwood as joint healers for the township of Millbrook, with all rights and responsibilities thereof." "And the past," someone called out, "his reputation?" "Is balanced by 20 years of recorded good works," Wilson answered firmly. "By lives saved, wrongs righted, and justice served where law fell short. Any man who disagrees can take it up with me personally." Outside, the winter sun had begun to thaw the snow, turning the streets to silver rivers of possibility. Inside, Sarah watched as Patterson carefully crossed out the false charges in the town records, replacing fear's hasty scrawl with truth's careful script. "Welcome home," Mrs. Henderson whispered, and this time Sarah let her tears fall freely. They were tears of joy, of homecoming, of wounds finally allowed to heal. The ranch lay 3 miles outside of town, a neat spread of land backed by pine-covered hills. Travis reined the wagon to a stop at the gate, wooden boards weathered but solid. Sarah noticed his hands were unusually tight on the reins. "Been meaning to show you something," he said, helping her down. Tommy had already scrambled out, racing ahead to examine a corral holding several fine horses. Travis reached into his coat, producing a folded document wrapped in oilskin. "Had this for years. Bought the place after Caroline and James. Never could bring myself to live here, though. Just kept it maintained, waiting for something I couldn't name." Sarah unfolded the deed carefully. The paper was high quality, the kind used for legal documents, but it was the name that caught her eye. "This is in your real name, Captain Michael Travis Blackwood. Seemed right to keep one piece of honest paper in my life." He watched Tommy running along the fence, the horses nickering softly at him. "Boy needs room to grow, space to learn. Riding, maybe keep a few animals of his own." "Travis," Sarah began, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "Ranch has good water, fertile soil. Previous owner's wife kept a healing garden. It's gone wild now, but the plants are still there. Herbs, medicinals, things both you and Caroline would know how to use." They walked toward the house, a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch. Simple rocking chairs faced west, toward the mountains. "Caroline planned it all," Travis continued, softly. "Where each room would be, how the light would fall. Even had ideas for curtains, though we never—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "Point is, it was meant to be a home, a real one, not just a place to sleep." Sarah touched the deed again, feeling the weight of what he was offering. Not just shelter, but legitimacy. A chance to rebuild both their lives in the open, under their true names. "The town council approved my practicing medicine here?" she asked carefully. Travis smiled. "Approved us both. Figure between your herb knowledge and my field medicine, we can help a lot of people. Do it proper, with licenses and all." Tommy's excited voice carried from the barn. "Mama, Mr. Travis, there's kittens in here." "Barn cats," Travis explained. "Keep the mice down. They're good mouses, but gentle with children." Sarah watched, her son's face light up as he cradled a tiny orange kitten. "He needs this," she said softly. "A place to put down roots, a chance to be just a boy, not the witch's son." "And you?" Travis's voice was equally quiet. "What do you need?" She turned to face him fully then, seeing not the feared outlaw or the decorated captain, but simply a man offering his heart, along with his home. "I need to know this is real," she whispered, "that it won't disappear like smoke the first time someone questions your past or doubts my healing." "Sarah," he took her hands, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I've spent 20 years running from who I was, trying to make up for things I did and didn't do. But these past days with you and Tommy, for the first time since Caroline, and James, I'm not running, I'm walking towards something." A sharp winter wind kicked up, carrying the clean scent of pine and promise. The deed rustled between them, its official seal catching the sunlight. "There's room in the garden," Travis added, "for new plants alongside the old ones. Room in the house for new memories beside the ones that never got made. Room enough for healing, all kinds of healing." Tommy's laughter rang out again as he discovered more kittens. Sarah felt something in her chest expand, like a flower finally finding sunlight. "It won't be easy," she warned. "People talk, even with the council's approval, and your past. Let them talk." His voice was firm. "We've both lived through. Worse than gossip, what matters is this." He gestured to Tommy playing in the barn, to the house waiting to be filled, to the garden ready for revival. "What matters is building something true." Sarah looked down at the deed once more, at the empty space below Travis's name, where another could be added. Looked at the home Caroline had planned, but never seen completed. Sometimes, she realized, love wasn't just about new beginnings, it was about completing something long left unfinished. "Yes," she said simply, and felt the future shift like winter giving way to spring. Spring came to Montana like a shy bride, tentative at first, then blooming with unexpected warmth. Sarah stood in the newly turned earth of the healing garden, a packet of seeds cradled in her palm. The morning sun caught the tarnished wedding ring on her finger, making it glow like a promise. Carolyn marked all the best spots, Travis said, consulting a carefully drawn map he'd found in his wife's old journal. She knew about light and shade, what grows best where. He pointed to a sunny corner. Thought we might put the fever few. There, you said it helped Tommy during that last bout of chills. Sarah nodded, remembering how quickly her son had recovered under their combined care. The town had begun to trust their healing abilities. Travis's battlefield experience complementing her herbal knowledge in ways that seemed meant to be. "Found these in town," Tommy announced, running up with a handful of paper packets. "Mr. Patterson said they're special seeds from back east, for healing and for pretty." Sarah examined the packets. Echinacea, yarrow, lavender, and, her breath caught, the same roses John had once planted for her in Millbrook. "Thought you might like those," Travis said softly. "Every healing garden needs something that feeds the soul as well as the body." The winter's trials had left their marks, but like the garden itself, they were being transformed. The townspeople who had once shunned Sarah now sought her advice on everything from colicky babies to arthritic joints. And Travis, whose name had once sparked fear, was becoming known for his gentle way with injured animals and children too scared to face the doctor's needle. "Look what else I got." Tommy held up a small terracotta pot containing a tiny horse chestnut sapling. "Mrs. Henderson says it'll grow tall as the house someday. Can I plant it by my window?" "Of course, sweetheart." Sarah watched as Travis helped Tommy dig the perfect spot, showing him how to measure the depth and prepare the soil. Her son's mismatched eyes, once a source of whispered fear, were now celebrated as a sign of his special insight. He could calm the most fractious horse or find herbs hidden in the deepest woods. "The Henderson girl's coming by later," Travis mentioned, patting soil around the sapling. "Wants to learn about the medicines. Says she's got a calling for healing work." Sarah smiled, remembering the shy request. Jenny Henderson, whose mother had once led the accusations against her, now spent every spare moment watching them work, asking questions, learning the difference between healing and harm. "We'll need help when summer comes," she agreed, "word spreading about what we can do here." Travis straightened, brushing dirt from his hands. The fearsome gunslinger was still there in his movements, in the watchful way he surveyed their surroundings, but it had been mellowed by something else, purpose, perhaps, or peace. "Got another surprise," he said, leading them to the barn. Inside, a new workbench had been set up, its surface smooth and ready. Tools for both healing and crafting were arranged carefully, mortars and pestles beside wood-carving knives, herb drying, racks next to leather-working tools. "Thought we might teach Tommy both trades," Travis explained, "healing and making. Between the three of us, we could help folks in all sorts of ways." Sarah touched the workbench, feeling the care that had gone into its creation. This was more than just a place to work. It was a legacy being built, step by careful step. A drift of apple blossoms blew in through the barn door, carrying the scent of renewal. In the garden, the newly planted seeds waited beneath the soil, holding the promise of growth and healing. The horse chestnut sapling stood straight and proud, its young leaves reaching for the sky. "Caroline would have loved this," Travis said quietly, watching Tommy arrange his carved animals on a special shelf meant just for them. She always said healing wasn't just about medicines. It was about building something that would last. Sarah slipped her hand into his, feeling the strength and gentleness there. "We're building it," she whispered, "all of us together." The seeds in her pocket seemed to warm at her words, as if responding to the truth of them. Some were from Caroline's careful planning, some from John's loving memory, some from their new neighbor's hopes for reconciliation. Together, they would grow into something stronger and more beautiful than any of them could have created alone. "Time to plant the lavender," Tommy called, already heading back to the garden with his little watering can. "Mama says it helps people." "Sleep sweet!" Travis squeezed Sarah's hand once before releasing it. "Well then," he said, smiling, "best not keep our gardener waiting." Together they stepped into the spring sunshine, ready to plant not just seeds, but roots, deep, strong, and true. The family Bible lay open on the kitchen table, its pages well worn with generations of recorded births, deaths, and marriages. Travis stood before it, pen hovering over the blank space beneath his parents' names, where Caroline and James had once been written and gently crossed out. "You don't have to do this," Sarah said softly, watching his hesitation. "The adoption papers are enough." "No," Travis replied, his voice firm. "Tommy deserves everything we can give him, a full history, roots he can trace." He looked at the stack of papers beside the Bible, adoption documents, waiting for final signatures. Both his fathers should be recorded here. Tommy burst in from the garden, clutching a bunch of wild roses. "Found these by the creek. Can we put them on the table for the celebration?" Sarah helped him arrange the flowers in a jar, while Travis carefully inked new lines in the Bible. First, John McCall's name, marking Tommy's birth father, then below it, with steady strokes, Michael Travis Blackwood, marking the father he'd become. "Sheriff Wilson's here," Tommy called, spotting a rider through the window, "and he's got his good coat on." The sheriff had indeed dressed for the occasion, his badge polished bright against dark wool. He carried a leather portfolio that could only contain one thing: the final approval for Travis's pardon, granted by the territorial governor himself. "Well," Wilson said, taking in their Sunday-best clothes and the roses on the table, "seems I'm right on time." "Just finishing up some family business," Travis replied, gesturing to the Bible and adoption papers. "Thought it was time to make everything official." Wilson nodded approvingly. Speaking of official, he opened the portfolio, revealing not just the pardon, but a new document, a marriage license waiting only for signatures. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Travis moved to her side, taking her fingers gently in his. "Didn't want to presume," he said quietly, "but I had Wilson draw up the papers just in case." He glanced at Tommy, who was practically vibrating with excitement. "Thought maybe we could do it all at once, make us a proper family in every way that counts." "I helped," Tommy burst out. "I told Sheriff Wilson you'd say yes because you look at Mr. Travis the same way Mrs. Henderson looks at her roses, like they're the best thing God ever made." A laugh rippled through the kitchen, breaking the moment's tension. Sarah touched the Bible where Travis had recorded their growing family tree, saw the space waiting for her name to be added. "Well," she said, smiling through tears, "we can't disappoint our boy, can we?" The kitchen filled with afternoon light as Wilson performed both ceremonies. First the adoption, making official what love had already decided, then the marriage that would bind them all together. Tommy stood proudly between them, holding the rings they'd had made in town. Simple bands marked with herbs and horses, symbols of their shared path. "By the power vested in me," Wilson concluded, "and with considerable joy, I now pronounce you man and wife, and this young man," he squeezed Tommy's shoulder, "officially a Blackwood." "McCall Blackwood?" Tommy corrected seriously. "Because I get to keep both my papa's names, right?" "Right you are, son," Travis said, his voice rough with emotion. He lifted the Bible, showing Tommy where both names had been recorded. "See, your whole history, right here, where you came from and where you're going." Sarah watched as her son traced the careful lines of script, his fingers moving from John's name to Travis's, then to the blank space where their marriage would soon be recorded. The Bible had seen so much: grief and joy, endings and beginnings. Now it would witness their new chapter, written in ink and love. "Does this mean I can call you Papa now?" Tommy asked Travis, "instead of Mr. Travis?" "I'd be honored," Travis replied softly, "though you don't have to if—" He was cut off by Tommy's fierce hug, the boy's face buried in his chest. Sarah joined. Them, feeling the future settle around them like a blessing. Wilson quietly gathered his papers, leaving the family to their moment. But at the door he paused. "You know," he said, "sometimes justice works in mysterious ways. Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air, show us what's true." He touched his hat. "Welcome home, Blackwoods, all of you." Through the window they could see the garden blooming, the horse-chestnut sapling reaching skyward, the roses nodding in the breeze. All of it growing, all of it proof that love, like healing, could transform even the deepest wounds into something beautiful. The new key felt different in Sarah's hand, lighter somehow, as if the brass had absorbed some of their happiness. Travis had presented it to her the morning after their wedding, a symbol of their fresh start together. He'd had locks changed throughout the house, erasing the boundaries between his past and their future. "So, we all start new," he'd said, watching her test it in the front door. No more his and hers, no more before and after, just us making this home together. Now, weeks later, Sarah used that key to unlock the surgery door, where their first patients of the day already waited. Jenny Henderson stood ready with her notebook, eager to begin another day of apprenticeship. "Mrs. Blackwood," she greeted, warmly, then smiled at Tommy, who was arranging his father's newly carved animals on the waiting room shelf. "And young Mr. McCall Blackwood, will you help me with the herbs today?" Tommy nodded eagerly. In the months since the adoption, he'd grown more confident, his mismatched eyes now seen as a healer's gift rather than a curse. The same townspeople who had once shunned him now sought his opinion on which herbs might ease their aches. "Papa's teaching me to carve medicine spoons," he announced proudly. "Says every healer needs their own tools." The morning unfolded in its new, familiar rhythm. Sarah and Jenny treated the usual array of complaints: Mrs. Patterson's rheumatism, little Billy Cooper's cough, the Mitchell baby's teething pain. Travis handled the more serious cases in the back surgery, his battlefield experience proving invaluable for everything from setting bones to stitching wounds. Between patients, Sarah caught glimpses of their personal life settling into place. Tommy's school books stacked neatly by the fire, Travis's gun belt hanging unused on its peg, her own herbs drying in neat bundles from the kitchen rafters. The key to it all sat warm in her pocket, a constant reminder of belonging. "Your boy's got a gift," Jenny observed during a quiet moment, watching Tommy explain to a young patient how the carved animals could help make medicine time less scary. "He sees right to the heart of hurting. Gets it from both his fathers," Sarah replied softly. "John's gentleness, Travis's strength." She touched the key in her pocket, and maybe a little from this place itself. The afternoon brought Sheriff Wilson, not for treatment but for dinner, a regular occurrence now. He carried town news and good-natured complaints about his deputy's smoking habit. "Speaking of habits," he said, watching Travis and Tommy work. Together at the carving bench, council's talking about making this place official. Town's first proper healing center, with both traditional and modern medicine. He smiled at Sarah. "Seems folks have finally figured out that sometimes the old ways and new ways work best together." Sarah thought of her key, how it opened both. The modern surgery and the traditional herb room with equal ease. Like blended families, she said, different paths leading to the same home. Evening found them in their favorite spots. Travis in his chair by the fire, working on a new batch of medicine spoons. Tommy at his feet, practicing with his own small knife under careful supervision. Sarah at her herb table, Jenny helping her prepare the next day's remedies. "Mama," Tommy asked, holding up his attempt at a spoon, "do you think Papa John would be proud of all of us?" Sarah felt Travis's attention shift, saw the way he held himself still, waiting for her answer. She drew out her key, letting it catch the firelight. "You know what your father told me when he gave me my first house key?" she said. "He said a home isn't just a place. It's all the love you bring to it. And yes, sweetheart, I think he'd be very proud of how much love we've brought here." Travis's hand found hers, warm and sure. Outside, they could hear the evening patrol passing, boots crunching on gravel. Once, that sound would have sent Travis reaching for his gun. Now it was just another thread in the tapestry of their daily life. "Time for bed, young healer," Travis said, noting Tommy's failing battle with sleep. "Big day tomorrow. Got that new mare coming in for training, and Reverend Smith's wife's baby due any day," Jenny added, gathering her things to leave. "Never know when we'll need our best helper." Sarah used her key one last time that night, locking up after Jenny left. The brass gleamed in the porch light, no longer new, but well-worn, well-loved, like their family itself, shaped by use and care, stronger for being tested, precious for being chosen. In their bedroom, she set the key on her dresser beside Travis's old military badge and John's worn wedding ring. Different pieces of their story, different paths that had led them home. Outside, the horse chestnut tree rustled its leaves, keeping watch over the sleeping house and all the healing it contained. 1 year to the day, after the blizzard that had changed their lives, the Blackwood family gathered in their Sunday best for a portrait. The photographer, up from Helena for the town's winter festival, set up his camera in their garden, where summer's healing herbs now slept under snow. "Quite a backdrop," he remarked, noting the horse chestnut tree, now tall enough to reach Tommy's window. "Tells a story, doesn't it?" Sarah smoothed Tommy's collar, smiling at how much he'd grown. At 9, he stood straight and proud between his parents, one hand holding his carved medicine horse, the other touching the herb pouch at his belt. His mismatched eyes, once a source of fear, now drew people from 3 counties seeking what they called the young healer's sight. Travis adjusted his tie, a concession to the occasion that still made him look slightly uncomfortable. But the fearsome gunslinger was long gone, replaced by a man whose hands were now known more for healing than harm. His scars remained, but they had softened, like the leather of a well-used medical bag. "Ready?" the photographer asked, ducking under his black cloth. "Wait!" Tommy darted inside, returning with 2 framed photographs, one of John McCall, another of Caroline and James. "They should be with us too." Sarah felt Travis's hand tighten on her shoulder as Tommy carefully propped the frames on the garden wall beside them. All their ghosts, all their angels, gathered for this moment of remembrance and celebration. "Perfect," the photographer said, softly, understanding in his voice. Now, everyone looked toward the light. The winter sun broke through the clouds as the shutter clicked, capturing them all, the living and the remembered, the healing and the healed. Later, when the portrait was developed, people would remark on its peculiar quality, how the light seemed to form a halo around the family, how even the black and white image somehow captured the warmth in their faces. "You know what day it is?" Tommy asked as they walked back inside, snow beginning to fall softly around them. "How could we forget?" Sarah replied, watching the flakes dance just as they had that desperate night. "The storm that brought us together." They gathered in the surgery, now closed for the holiday, but still carrying the comforting scent of herbs and healing. Jenny Henderson's neat labels marked every drawer and shelf, her apprenticeship nearly complete. Tommy's carved animals kept watch from their special shelf, each one marking a child helped, a fear eased, a pain soothed. Travis built up the fire while Sarah prepared tea, the same willow bark blend that had saved Tommy during that first fevered night. They sat together, watching the snow fall outside windows that no longer needed to fear what winter might bring. "Sometimes I think about that night," Tommy said thoughtfully, sipping his tea. "How scared we were until Papa Travis found us. How everything that seemed bad turned out to be good in the end." Sarah touched her wedding ring, then Travis's hand. "That's what healing really is, isn't it? Not just fixing what's broken, but finding the good that can come from pain." "Caroline used to say something similar," Travis added, his voice warm with memory rather than grief. "Said every wound teaches us something if we're brave enough to learn." Outside, the snow fell thicker, but inside their home all was warmth and light. The portrait would hang in their surgery for years to come, showing visitors what was possible when fear gave way to trust, when judgment turned to understanding, when lost souls found each other in the darkness. "Tell me again," Tommy said, settling into his favorite story-listening spot by the fire. "About the night we became a family." Sarah looked at Travis, saw in his eyes the same gratitude she felt. Their son had asked for this story countless times, but somehow it never grew old. This tale of survival and redemption, of love forged in winter's crucible. "Well," Travis began, his voice taking on the gentle tone reserved for family, "it was a night just like this, when the snow came without warning." Sarah leaned against him, feeling his steady heartbeat. Through the window, she could see the horse chestnut tree standing tall against the storm, its branches reaching for heaven like prayers made manifest. Soon the snow would pass, spring would return, and their garden would bloom again with herbs of healing and hope. But for now they had this, a warm fire, a family portrait, and a story of how love could turn the darkest night into the brightest blessing.